You just got the promotion, and your first thought isn't relief, it's a low, creeping dread. There's this moment I want you to sit with. It happens to someone, and you might recognize yourself in it. She's a project manager at a mid-sized tech company, 5 years in, 2 successful product launches, a team that respects her, emails from executives thanking her for her work. On paper, she's exactly where she's supposed to be. The conscious I that signs her name and builds her resume has earned every credential, every success, every reason to feel confident in what she does. But in the meeting, when her boss asks her to lead the next major initiative, something doesn't match up. She hears herself say yes. She watches herself nod. And then, alone in her car, she thinks, I have no idea what I'm doing. Not because the job is beyond her. She knows how to do this work. She's done harder things, but there's this other voice underneath, the one that's always whispering, that insists, you got lucky. Someone didn't look closely enough. You slipped through because they were distracted. When they really look, when they finally pay attention, they're going to see that the version of yourself you've dressed up for the world is the only part of you that actually works. Everything underneath, everything happening inside you that you're not watching, is confused and small and doesn't belong here. Here's what makes this so strange. She can point to the evidence. She can name what she's done. The work is real. The competence is real, and yet the fear is equally real. It moves through her like it's based on something true. It has the weight of truth. So she performs. She's good at it by now. She prepares obsessively. She double-checks everything. She's the first one in and the last one out. And it works. The promotion comes through, the project succeeds, and she feels nothing like relief. She feels like she narrowly escaped being caught. The gap is impossible. How can someone be genuinely capable and genuinely fraudulent at the same time? How can the evidence be so clear and the fear so convincing? What is it about reaching for something real that makes you feel like you're wearing a mask that's become too tight? That's where we're going in this conversation. The gap isn't a contradiction. It's a system. Let me walk you back to that moment in the car. She's sitting there, the promotion confirmed, the project in motion, everything external pointing to success. And inside, there's this voice saying she's a fraud. What if both are completely true? Not because of some twist in logic, but because she's actually running 2 separate operations at the same time, and she's only fully awake to one of them? Here's what's happening. From childhood on, you're shaped by what the world responds to. Not consciously. It's more subtle than that. You notice which parts of yourself get you approval, get you safety, get you seen in the way you need to be seen. Your parent lights up when you're competent and organized. Your teacher praises you for being reliable. Your peers like you when you're confident. The world keeps telling you, be this version of yourself. So you do. You build a version, call it the professional you, the successful you, the one who has it together. This is the version of yourself you've dressed up for the world. It's real, absolutely. You actually earned those credentials. You actually did that work. But it's not the whole you. It's the you that works. What gets left behind is everything that doesn't fit that image. The uncertainty, the moments when you don't know what you're doing, the mistakes you made and learned from, the failures that changed you, the questions you can't answer, the ways you're still becoming, the parts of yourself that feel messy or incomplete or unfinished. These aren't small things. They're fundamental. They're how humans actually operate. But they don't match the image you've built. They don't belong in the persona you've constructed for adaptation. So there's a cost. You don't exactly decide to disown them. It happens gradually. You stop admitting them to yourself. You develop a kind of selective awareness. You become practiced at noticing what makes you look right and blind to everything that would complicate that picture. But here's what matters. Those parts don't disappear. They're still in there. Everything you've locked away because it felt too risky to show. Your uncertainty, your incompleteness, your I don't actually know. It's all still operating. It's still moving. And because it's not being acknowledged, not being integrated, not being given any conscious role, it starts to accumulate its own force. It develops its own voice. And that voice is the imposter feeling. The more successful the persona becomes, the more insistent this voice grows. That's the real dynamic. She's genuinely competent. That part is absolutely true. She's learned skills, she's delivered results, she's earned recognition. But the more she succeeds from inside the persona, the more everything she's disowned presses against her from underneath. It's not rational. It doesn't have to be logical. It just has a kind of gravitational pull, a pressure that says you're wearing a mask, and I'm here to remind you that the real you, the part you've hidden, is still in here, still not being let in, still not allowed to be seen. And that feels like fraud, not because she's incompetent, but because she's incomplete in the version she's showing the world. So when you ask how someone can be genuinely capable and genuinely fraudulent at the same time, the answer is that the fraud isn't about lying about what you can do. It's about the act of pretending at all. It's the gap between the whole person you are and the edited version you've learned to present. The more you succeed in that edited version, the louder the hidden version insists that you're not actually who you're pretending to be. And that's where we have to look next. How does this actually work? How does the persona inflate, and what does the disowned part actually do when it's not being watched? The mechanism has a shape. It's not that imposter syndrome shows up randomly, triggered by any success. It follows a sequence, a chain where each link pulls the next one taut. And once you see the sequence, you can see how it builds and why it gets stronger the more you achieve. It starts early, before you're aware it's starting. You're in your childhood, and you're noticing what works. Your parent responds when you're competent. Your teacher sees you when you're organized. The world is responsive, and you're learning. This version of myself makes sense here. This version gets me what I need. So you build it deliberately at first, then less deliberately, then automatically. You learn to foreground certain qualities, the ones that get recognition, safety, approval, and you practice them until they feel natural. You're constructing a persona. It's not false, exactly. You're genuinely competent. You're genuinely organized. But it's curated. It's the self you've learned to present. And maintaining it requires constant, mostly invisible effort. That effort is the cost. Because the persona you're building has boundaries. It can only be so much and not other things. It can be confident but not uncertain, capable but not struggling, reliable but not confused. And as you succeed in that persona, as the world responds to it, as you get promoted and recognized and trusted, you can't bring everything with you. The uncertainty, the times you don't know what you're doing, the questions that wake you up at 3 in the morning, the ways you're still becoming, these don't fit the image anymore. They're too much. They're too risky. So you stop admitting them. You develop what we might call selective awareness. You become practiced at noticing what makes you look right and increasingly blind to everything that would complicate that picture. You're not doing this consciously. It happens through 1,000 small choices, 1,000 moments of catching yourself before you say something vulnerable, before you show your doubt, before you break the boundary of the persona you've learned to present. But here's where the system starts to close in. The parts you're disowning don't go away. They're still there, still moving, still part of how you operate. Your uncertainty doesn't vanish because you stop acknowledging it. Your incompleteness doesn't disappear because you've trained yourself not to see it. Instead, these qualities, all of them now unacknowledged, unintegrated, operating in the dark, they begin to gather. They coalesce. They form what we might call a shadow. This is the repository of everything you've decided is too risky to show. Your doubt, your confusion, your I don't know, your mistakes and failures and incompleteness. All the very human, very real parts of yourself that you've locked away. And here's what's critical. The shadow isn't dormant. It's not just a storage locker for your disowned material. It's active. It's operating. It has its own kind of intelligence. The shadow works from within, and it works through pressure. When you succeed in your persona, when you get the promotion, when the project works, when the external world confirms that you've done it right, the shadow feels the gap most acutely. Here you are, succeeding as this edited version, And everything you've hidden is still here, still real, still operating, and still not being let in. So the shadow sends a message. It isn't malicious. It's not trying to sabotage you. It's trying to balance the system. It sends the message, you're a fraud. You're wearing a mask. The real you, the incomplete, uncertain, still becoming version, is in here, and everyone's going to see it eventually. That's where the imposter feeling comes from. Not from incompetence, from a kind of internal pressure, a correction mechanism. The more successful your persona becomes, the more insistent this pressure grows. Because the larger the gap between the version you're showing and the totality of who you are, the stronger the force trying to close that gap from underneath. This is why external validation doesn't cure it. You can get promoted, you can get praised, you can succeed by every external measure, and the imposter feeling can still be there, still insisting, still real, because it's not responding to your competence, it's responding to your incompleteness. It's the shadow saying, you're hiding me. You're succeeding in a persona that has no room for what I am. And until that changes, until the gap itself closes, the pressure will keep building. That's the mechanism. And now comes the question, what do you actually do about it? You don't close the gap by achieving more. That's the first thing to know. You don't close it by getting better at the persona, by tightening the mask, by working harder to prove yourself. Because the gap itself isn't created by incompetence. It's created by incompleteness. The solution isn't external. It's not another promotion, not another success, not another credential that finally silences the voice. The solution is internal, and it runs counter to every instinct you've developed so far. You have to stop reinforcing the persona and start admitting what it leaves out. You have to bring the disowned parts back in. And the strangest part is that this works, not by making you less competent, but by making you more integrated. The practice has 3 movements. The first is identifying the gap itself. You need to notice, not in a vague sense, but specifically, what you're not bringing to the table. When did you last say, I don't know, in a meeting where you felt expected to have answers? When did you last admit uncertainty to someone you needed to look competent in front of? When did you last let someone see you not figured out? These aren't character flaws. They're the material you've cordoned off. The second movement is admitting it, but slowly and in safe spaces first. You don't blow up your persona immediately. You don't go to your boss and say everything you've been hiding. You start smaller. You tell a trusted friend something true about the gap between how you appear and how you feel. You write it down where no one will read it. You say it out loud in your car. You're not performing anymore. You're just speaking truth to the person who needs to hear it most, yourself. And the third movement is watching what happens. The imposter feeling gets its power from being unacknowledged, from existing in the shadow where it can press against you invisibly. The moment you bring it into conscious awareness, the moment you say it out loud, something shifts. Not immediately, not like a light switch, but the pressure begins to release because you've stopped fighting it. You've made room for it. Why does this actually work? Because the shadow only has power when it's operating unconsciously, when it's a pressure you can't name, a voice you can't locate. The moment you say the words, I'm uncertain, I don't fully understand this, I'm still becoming, the shadow loses its separate identity. It stops being an opponent and becomes part of the conversation. And here's what most people miss. Real competence includes not knowing. It includes being able to sit with uncertainty and move forward anyway. Every person who's genuinely good at what they do knows that incompleteness and mastery exist in the same person. The mask wearer thinks competence means never showing confusion. The integrated person knows that naming confusion is often the sign of someone who understands the territory well enough to know where the edges are. There's a particular burden that falls on people who think deeply, who process slowly, who need time to form a complete picture before they speak. These people often mistake their own depth for incompetence. They're in a meeting, everyone's quick to respond, and they need 5 minutes of quiet to actually think. They feel like they're moving too slowly, and they translate that slowness into inadequacy. But slowness is often the signature of depth. It's not incompetence. It's wisdom in motion. and the vulnerability that comes from admitting that you need time to think, that you process differently, that you're not wired for the quick surface response, that's not weakness. That's the point where your actual strength can finally enter the room, because you're not performing speed anymore. You're bringing your authentic way of knowing. The practice unfolds over time. It's not a one-time confession that fixes everything. It's an ongoing shift, a loosening of the mask every time you notice yourself tightening it. You'll feel the pull to perform, to present the certain version, to hide the uncertainty. And sometimes you'll give in to that pull. That's normal. But more and more you'll notice it happening, and you'll choose to loosen it. You'll say the true thing instead of the safe thing. You'll admit what you don't know. And slowly the gap narrows. Not because you're less competent, but because you're finally allowed to be as competent as you actually are, which includes being incomplete, still becoming, still learning. The tightness you feel isn't evidence that you're a fraud. It's evidence that you're wearing a mask, and masks always feel tight. They're supposed to. The discomfort you interpret as exposure is actually the signature of a gap between who you've been told to be and who you actually are. Close that gap, and the fraud feeling doesn't disappear because you finally achieve enough. It disappears because you stop performing the person who needs to achieve enough. The solution was never more competence. It was integration. It was letting your actual knowing, your actual doubt, your actual becoming, all of it, be what shows up in the room. You came here genuinely capable and genuinely afraid of being seen as a fraud. Both of those things are completely true. And they're both true because the persona is real. It was built for a reason, and it works. But it's also just a mask. A brilliant one, a functional one, but not you. When you recognize the system, you're not dismantling your competence. You're refusing to let the persona's fear be the only voice in the room. You're allowing your actual self to take up space alongside it. The con stops the moment you stop being the only audience. Stop performing for yourself. Stop believing the story that your hesitation is your failure. That gentle voice in you that says, "I don't know yet," that's not weakness whispering. That's wisdom. And the day you say it out loud instead of hiding it, you'll realize you were never as small as you thought. You were just being very, very quietly powerful. Let that change. Let yourself be heard.